begin tonight with the escalating standoff, of course, between Trump and Congress over Trump's stonewalling of congressional investigations. The chairman of the Oversight Committee now saying jail time could be on the table for witnesses who ignore subpoenas.
There is no tool in our toolbox that we should not explore. We will look at all those tools from a very practical standpoint. It may be that we want to just deal with fines. I don't know, but it's either fines and or prison.
Fines or prison. That is the threat as Democrats are in the middle of a huge power struggle with Trump Attorney General Bill Barr, who's threatening to bail on their hearing Thursday after Democrats, of course, said they want him to face additional questions from committee staffers. Judiciary Chair Jerry Nadler said they're preparing a subpoena if Barr does not show. Now Chairman Cummings raising the stakes and making it very clear Democrats are in uncharted territory. Watch this.
This is new for us. This is new. This situation where we can't get documents. And by the way, can I get one single White House witness? Come on now.
With me, Mara Gang, editorial board member for the New York Times, and Richard Stengel, who was Under Secretary of State in the Obama administration and the former managing editor of Time magazine. Richard, I'll start with you on this one. Fines or jail? Neither of those are very good prospects, to say the least, for the Attorney General. Possibly. You're talking about the Attorney General of the United States here. Possibly fines or jail if he does not show up for this Thursday testimony. Is that the only way the Democrats can go about this?
There are other ways, but I would say let's bring it on. This is a conflict between the Article I branch, which is Congress, and the Article II branch, the executive. This is how our system is supposed to work. There's supposed to be conflict between them, and I think the fact that Congress is threatening these kinds of remedies, these are remedies that are well within its power. Again, the executive can resist, and ultimately the judicial system will decide. But I think this is exactly how our system of checks and balances is supposed to work, and we're seeing it play out in front of us.
I mean, we're seeing, obviously, Bill Barr threaten not to show up on Thursday. We're hearing the Trump administration obviously defying so many subpoenas when it comes to financial records. We're going to be talking about that later on in the show. So he's not just talking about Bill Barr here. He is talking about all of these stops along the way that the Trump administration has made in order to keep Congress from pursuing the investigation that they are pursuing, Mara.
I mean, that's right. First of all, if the House isn't going to pursue impeachment proceedings, then this is exactly what they should be doing. The only unfortunate part here is that there aren't more Republicans joining in them, because this really isn't a partisan matter. This is about Congress doing its job, which is to hold, just checks and balances, and to hold this White House in particular accountable. That's not a partisan effort. It's just a shame that Republicans have become a party that are unwilling to perform their central obligation in government as public servants.
Richard Reich, former Clinton cabinet secretary, calling for Congress to be ready to arrest Bill Barr. He's going so far as to say, get ready to arrest, again, the Attorney General for not showing up possibly on Thursday morning. He's already wrote in Newsweek about the obstruction today. He said, no questioning a former White House security director about issuances of security clearances, no questioning anybody about presidential tax returns. Such a blanket edict fits a dictator of a banana republic, not the president of a constitutional republic founded on separation of powers. He is calling for the possible arrest of the Attorney General. That is where we are at right now.
I think that's a little extreme. And again, it is separation of powers, and there's all different kinds of things that you can do. I actually thought that Joe Biden moved the ball a little bit further than anybody today by saying that, in fact, by resisting cooperating with a legitimate investigation by an oversight branch of Congress, that is a potentially impeachable offense in and of itself, apart from everything in the Barr investigation, which I think is a really interesting idea.
Do you think Democrats, Mara, are going to follow through on all of these threats that they've made so far?
Oh, I think there's a lot of ground to cover between that point and where we are now. And I think that the Democrats are trying to go about this, it seems, methodically and logically. And this is a really good place to start. I mean, these are committees that have been around for many years. They didn't, exist because of the White House's inappropriate behavior. So they are just doing business as usual, which is the exact right way to proceed. I mean, it's an extraordinary situation, but at this point, the House is using, as you said, the exact means within its power, and that's they're doing their job.
I want to go back to the point that you made about Joe Biden, because on the campaign trail, we have not necessarily heard such strong language coming from people that have declared they're running for president of the United States so far, except Joe Biden. We've heard, obviously, from Elizabeth Warren that she was calling for impeachment after the Mueller report came out. What do you make of it?
I think it's a very smart point, and I think it's another bite out of the apple for Congress. I mean, if you're trying to obstruct a legitimate investigation by one branch of Congress, that is a potentially impeachable offense. And by the way, as it's been said 1,000 times, high crimes and misdemeanors is whatever Congress says it is. And Congress can decide that if President Trump is not cooperating with an investigation, that's a high crime and misdemeanor.
You have Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi obviously meeting with the president earlier this morning. Chuck Schumer basically going on the record and saying that he thinks that they can negotiate with the president when it comes to infrastructure while they're investigating the president as well. I would go out on a limb and say I think they might be giving the president a little bit with too much credit on all of this. But let's take a listen to them, and then I'll have you guys react.
Madam Speaker, how hard is it to work with this president on infrastructure when he's stonewalling you on investigations?
Well, we can, obviously, we are here to do something for the American people.
In previous meetings, the president has said if these investigations continue, I can't work with you. He didn't bring it up. I believe we can do both at once.
Mara.
Well, two things. One is that these guys, Pelosi and Schumer, are quite experienced at this, and I think they understand that you can catch more bees with honey than vinegar. The other thing is that actually this is infrastructure is an area where the president does have an interest on building things, on putting his name on things, and that's actually that makes sense that he would work with the Democrats in this. The problem that everyone's going to have on infrastructure is actually the Republican Party, which is grounded in rural areas of the country that are not going to want to pay for the New York City subway. So that's actually where the negotiating is going to happen. It's not between the Democrats and the president, but between the president and his own
No,
party.
but you make a good point, because infrastructure really is, I mean, how many times has the president had infrastructure week throughout these last 2 years of his administration? I mean, if there is one place there could be a bipartisan effort, it is on infrastructure. The question is if it's actually going to happen, especially when you present a $1 trillion plus infrastructure plan in front of the president, and you wouldn't give the money that he needed for his border wall. If you're in the president's position, I could imagine that he wouldn't necessarily be on board with something like that.
Well, it's in, I mean, as you suggest, it's in both of their interests to do it. And I think it's particularly in the president's interest if there is impeachment proceedings and there is an investigation. He says, look, I'm still delivering on this great benefit for the American public, even while I'm being harassed. So it's in both of their interests to do it.
All right, I want to bring in former California Senator Barbara Boxer. You two, I want you guys to stick around for this conversation as well. Senator, thank you so much for joining us on this. Very much appreciate it. I'm sure that you just heard we were talking about, obviously, the infrastructure meeting that the president had with Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, Speaker Pelosi, earlier today. And they made the point that you can still make deals with the president while investigating them as well. Are you on board with this? You believe it could happen?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There is no choice. It's our job. I mean, I served for 10 years in the House, 24 years in the Senate, and I was the chairman of the Senate Public Works, Environment and Public Works Committee, which was responsible for the highway bill. And I will agree that I think the tension is going to become more between Republicans and Democrats, because before I left, I was able to put together with Jim Inhofe, my Republican friend, a 5-year infrastructure bill that's about to run out in about another year or two. But it was half the money that they're talking about now. So it's going to be very difficult, because you got to look at the gas tax. You have to look at vehicle miles traveled. You're going to do a wealth tax with this president? I don't know. I would hope he'd be open to it. But the Republicans, particularly Mitch McConnell, has stated he's not that excited about it. But you got to do both. That's what the Constitution says: oversight and legislation.
Let's go back to the conversation that I was having earlier, which is Bill Barr and how he is possibly refusing to show up on Thursday for his congressional testimony. The Attorney General making the argument that he doesn't want to be interviewed by congressional staffers. Do you think, Senator, we're going to see Barr testifying on Thursday?
I hope so, for the sake of this great nation. We have equal branches of government, and as was stated by your guests, it is very important that the administration allow Congress to do its work. So I hope so. And I could tell you, if he doesn't show up, it's shocking, because it really would be obstruction of Congress. And that is very serious. And I think Joe Biden made a good point. You've got one thing to look at obstruction of the investigation that Mueller did, and now you see in plain daylight a president who's saying, my staff won't come, the papers won't come, I don't care what you do, I'll see you in court. It's chaotic, frankly.
Richard, what legs does the Attorney General have to stand on when he says he does not want to be interviewed by congressional staffers? Since when do you provide testimony and you can dictate who it is that is actually asking you the questions?
Well, and by the way, there's a history of people being questioned by staff. If you go back to Watergate, Iran-Contra,
right,
there were staff questions. In fact, there's a history of cabinet officers being questioned by staff. I mean, the thing that nobody's talking about is the reason he doesn't want to be interviewed by staff is the way the system works is that each congressperson has 5 minutes. And what they do, instead of asking questions seriatim, like passing it the baton from one to another, they just ask questions so they can get 30 seconds on their evening news broadcast in their local district. So that's easy to answer questions because you can stall one after another. So Congress should either decide, hey, we're going to have a plan and have a narrative and have questions after each other, or yes, let's have staff people question the Attorney General. He should be competent to answer those questions.
Senator, the Washington Post is reporting Trump's obstruction is making more Democrats consider impeachment here. What do you make of that?
I have to say myself, watching all of this, it looks like he's asking for it. He's asking for it. I mean, I remember politicians in the past that said, follow me around, you won't find anything. And yeah, you found things. I mean, he really is doing this. And I think that's why Nancy Pelosi was very smart when initially she said, let's just start the investigations and follow it wherever it goes. Nothing should be off the table, in my opinion. Not impeachment, not censoring him. Nothing should be off the table.
So
are you going all that? Yeah.
So, Senator, are you going so far as to say you think the president actually wants impeachment in a way? He's kind of threatening Congress to try and impeach him?
I wouldn't know what he wants. He doesn't make any sense to me. But what I'm suggesting to you is that his actions, this latest flap with Barr, as was stated, we have hearings. We had in the Kavanaugh hearing where the Republicans had a staff attorney who was hired for the express purpose of questioning Blasey Ford. This goes on all the time. You have to say, what are you hiding? And by hiding everything, and even now his personal attorneys are suing Deutsche Bank, you have to say, what is the Congress going to do? They have to protect the country, not only from this president, but from what this whole thing sets in terms of precedents for the future, how a president can delay and distract and move away from our Constitution. It's dangerous.
All right, Senator Barbara Boxer, Mara Gay, and Richard Schenkel, thank you guys all.
Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.